Alrighty, so we will get rolling. So the first thing that I do with students is I've usually, when I see students in schools, I've usually gone before I do the individual career counseling session. I've gone to the school and done a little presentation. We talk about things, show them a little video about things like finding your passion and trying to figure out what you really love to do and things like that. So that's always done ahead of time. And then when I do the individual sessions, that's kind of what we're doing here. So I always ask students, what kinds of things do you like to do? What do you love doing? Finding your passion is really important. There's a guy named Ken Coleman who I started to do a little more research into and use some of his material. So I'm going to go back here, and anytime that my screen doesn't look like what you're looking at, then we will, you give me a holler and we'll try and fix that. So the finding your passion stuff is important because I always tell students, I want you to wake up every day wanting to go to work. I don't want you to mope around and complain about things. So having passion for what you do is important. And questions like, who do I most want to help? What problem do I most want to solve? And what solution do I most want to provide are the kinds of questions that help you to find your passion. There's little activities in here that you can do, little kind of questions, open-ended questions to ask yourself. And I also use the Career Clarity Guide from Ken Coleman. So again, those questions, those open-ended questions. And I usually get students to do this by themselves or do this with their parents at some point. So ask questions like, what do you do really well? What do you do better than other people? And what do you love to do the most? What are some of those things that you love to do? And what are some of the results that matter most to you? And that's kind of how you find your mission, your vision, and your passion. And there's a bunch of other stuff on his website. You can go to it. Some of the stuff you can get for free, and some of you have to buy. But he's got a lot of good information. He's a career counselor on the radio from the United States. The number works in Canada, so if I kind of suck at doing this, you can certainly phone him up and give him a call, ask him what kind of advice he can give you. So I will go back now to the individual career counseling stuff. So after we talk about passion, I always talk about finding and it's part of the finding your passion can be helped by using my blueprint. So my blueprint is a web-based program that the Ministry of Education buys for every student in Saskatchewan. The who am I part is usually something I get the kids to do before I get there, or when I'm doing the original visit, before I meet with them individually. And they answer questions about their learning styles, personality, interests, knowledge, motivations. And then they can do this little compatibility survey that just reinforces or filters or kind of refines their answers a little bit. So when I did it, you can pick whichever career cluster you want, a bunch of different options here. And when I did it, I just did a couple for the students. So I came up with a 96% match or 33 or whatever it is. So if you want to know how it works, or even just to show you how it works real quickly, it asks you questions. I think there's about 10 questions here. Do you want to write reports of activities? That sounds fantastic. Do I want to remove captured animals? Yes, that's thrilling. Do I want to answer inquiries from the public? Yes, that's wonderful. And then it will give me an idea of how much I would like to be an animal control worker or an entertainer or embalmer or a whatever it is. And you can go to the cluster and look at different things. There's all kinds of different occupations in the program. So whatever it is that you're interested in. You go to the high school tab, there is a course planner here. So I'm based out of Assiniboia, so I just use that as my template here. And kids can put in the classes that they've taken, the marks they received, the credits they have, all that kind of stuff. The post-secondary tab is probably the one that I use the most as a career counselor. So you can type in an apprenticeship if you want something specific. I always tell students who are interested in apprenticing, make sure you understand as much as you can about apprenticeship and how it works. So they give you an overview. You can dig into the skilled trades more. Youth apprenticeship is a thing that's kind of specific to Saskatchewan. And the college and university is really handy. So if I'm doing this with students and parents. So if I have a student interested in welding, this is going to tell me everywhere in Canada you can take a pre-employment welding course. So there's 227 different results in Canada where you can take a welding course. It might, or where the keyword welding pops up. So there's welding, and then there's fabricator welding, and then there's semi-automatic, and there's journey person. So there's different things that students will find in here regarding whatever particular post-secondary program they want. They can filter according to what location they want to be. It knows you're logged in Saskatchewan, so those come up first. So it gives you the options of the different regional colleges in Sask Poly. The only place that it doesn't have, the only options it doesn't have are some of the hair and aesthetics places. So those are places like the MC College and Elite Beauty School and different places like that. Those are private schools or vocational schools, and I'll show you those in a little bit. They're not on my blueprint, but if you want to filter out by program, if you really want to know where in Alberta you could take welding courses, then you can go that way. You can go to the workplace tab, which is, some of these are kind of redundant. The same thing shows up multiple places. So just to show you what each occupation looks like, because if you're looking for a job or more about a particular occupation, everyone has the same information about it. So it always tells you what they do, what kind of education that's required, what are the chances of getting a job. Sometimes it's not listed there, and this ballpark salary. And these are all Saskatchewan statistics that are used. And a little bit about the workplace, and then usually a couple of videos of people doing the work, some important skills that are common to people who are doing that, and then some related occupations. And those are handy because students don't always think about the occupations that they just don't know about them, that might be related to that thing that they're interested in doing. So if we go to the work tab, we get the occupations, and it always has to spin for a while. That's its thing. Same kind of thing. If I go to automotive repair, it's going to give me the same information as I just showed you for the previous one. You can search by cluster, so there's different ways of going about that. Students can build a resume and a cover letter right in the program, and especially if students have never made a resume or a cover letter before, is a great way to do it, because all you need to do is kind of fill in the blanks. So it's a really simple resume, simple cover letter to make, and then you can export it to Word and make it look spiffy and fancy it up and things like that. But to kind of start from scratch, this is one of the easiest ways if you're starting from no resume at all. You can also do job searches, because not all students want to go into a post-secondary program, so they're going to go find a job. So right now, according to Indeed, there are about 6,000 jobs available in Saskatchewan. You can look using Career Builder or Monster or Workopolis or different companies as well. The Money tab is where students can build a budget. They can learn about budgeting and financial planning, and this guide is also in the guides I'm going to show you next. So learning about apprenticeship, that's the same tab that I showed you earlier: budgeting, financial planning, how to be successful in post-secondary, building resumes, cover letters, setting goals, financial literacy, how to find a job, mental health stuff, how to be successful in school, transitioning, how to pay for school, learning in the States. There is a tab. Actually, I'll go to the back to the post-secondary. I forgot to show you. There is a button for some students who want to go to the States. You can search American institutions. So I find my blueprint to be a more effective way than using the Google machine to do your searching, because it already has everything, all the public schools in Canada and most of them in the United States, all here for you. It's a little bit easier, a little bit quicker search. So where is my blueprint? Well, if you go to everything that I'm showing you today is in two places. It's under the Students tab on the Prairie South site. Go to Career Development, and I'm going to show you scholarships later. But under the Career Development tab and Career Planning, if you go to Web-Based Career Planning Programs, there's a parent sign up and there's a student sign up. And I tell students to sign up, and the instructions are in there as well. Sign up using a non-Prairie South email, so don't use their school email, because you can use this after you're done grade 12 till you're 150 years old. And as long as the ministry keeps paying for it, students can keep using it. And we do encourage parents to sign up and create a portfolio on there as well. So that's my blueprint. I'm just going to zip through this as kind of my reminder of what to tell people, and I'm not going to read over any of it, but you can certainly go here when you're done. And everything that I'm telling you is basically on the website, in the handouts and such. So in terms of what students do after grade 12, some of them go right into the workforce, some of them go into the military, some of them want to apprentice. So I explain apprenticeship and how that works. And I explained the program called Youth Apprenticeship. So just to show you what that looks like, we're going to go back here and go to students and go down to apprenticeship credit for a sec. Youth Apprenticeship is a series of 12 challenges. They're not difficult things. Some of them are things like take a PEA credit, that's one of them. So there's 12 of them in total. And you print this off. You have to be signed up through a school, and you have to have a teacher as your sort of youth apprenticeship champion, and that teacher will help to get you through it and show you what you need to do and fill out the paperwork with Sask Apprenticeship. So you fill out your paperwork with Sask Apprenticeship, and then you answer the questions for each of these. So they're not difficult. If you go to my blueprint, all the answers are right there for this particular one. So you find it, pick a trade you're interested, tell what they do, a little bit about the workplace, and so on. And then there's other questions like have an interview with a journey person, or have a discussion with a sort of about trades. Then there's an interview with a journey person later on, stuff like that. So lots of good things. And if students do that, those 12 challenges, and they do all the paperwork with the Sask Apprenticeship, they get 300 hours knocked off of the 7,200 hours it takes to become a carpenter or a mechanic or a electrician, or the 5,400 hours it takes to become a welder, or 3,600 hours it takes to become a hairdresser. So that's something that I always talk to students about. Okay, that's youth apprenticeship. In terms of resume building, I talk about career safety education, and there's just to go back here, back on the students tab under career planning, there's a career safety education training program. So students can take these three, are kind of the mandatory courses, and if they've taken them before, they can just submit their certificate numbers and they'll get credit for them. So you do your young worker readiness certificate, WMIS, and mental wellness thing, and then any one of the electives. And some with COVID, they were having different electives and some changes and things like that went on. But if you contact the youth or the safety council, they'll fill you in on the details and help you out. All right. I talk to students about getting a job, and I do a little more focused discussion if students are interested in that. So talk about resume writing and cover letters and portfolios. And I always remind students, especially if they're going right into the workforce, look at what you put online, because sometimes you put really stupid things about yourself online and you make stupid comments on Twitter or whatever. And people who try to hire you often don't hire you because you put dumb things. Just ask the people who don't get on the ticket when it comes to elections every few years. I talk to students about job interviews and the different kinds of job interviews. Traditional interviews are more interview questions are ones like, can you weld or can you type 100 words a minute? And those are easy questions. The other ones that are a little more complicated are things like, tell me about a crisis and how you dealt with it, or tell me about how you went above and beyond to help a customer or get a job done. Those are ones that take a little more thinking, and I always tell students to research as much as possible those non-traditional interview questions if they are trying to find answers to or if they can come up with the questions and an answer to the question, they look a lot better in the interview than if they just kind of stumble through it. I always tell students to make sure that if it's a permanent kind of thing, if they're going to go into the workforce permanently, that's what they want to do. They never want to go to post-secondary, that's fine, but they have to enjoy what they do. And if it's one of those things where students are thinking, well, I'm going to work for a while and try and put away some money and then go to school, that's fine too. The most important thing is to make a plan and stick to it. Or if you need to change the plan, then change the plan. But I don't want students to have regrets, and when they're 35 or 40 years old, sitting there wishing they would have gone to university or gone to tech school or learned a trade or something. It is nice for them to figure that out a little bit earlier. Some students want to go to post-secondary, and that's what we're talking about here. So for those students, when you apply to university, typically you apply and the university application form will have the question about what your second choice would be. So if you didn't get into your first choice, what's your second? And so students always want to have a plan B. You don't have that at places like Sask Polytech. They give you one application and you get one choice per application. If you want to apply again with a second application and a second application fee, then you can certainly do that as your backup plan. And for some students, if it's apprenticeship as their backup plan or their main plan, just to show you how apprenticeship works, if we go down to apprenticeship information. So at the bottom, you come out with the same piece of paper, you get a journey ticket. The most direct way is right after grade 12, you find someone to hire you and you go through apprenticeship. And that's a series of go to school for about 1,500 hours, and then you go to school. So I say school, go to work for 1,500 hours, go to work for about 7 or 8 weeks, and then go back to work. And you repeat that 2, 3, or 4 times, depending on the length of time that the number of hours required. And that's the most direct way. It's the cheapest way. The other way, and some employers will tell students this, you have to go get pre-employment because you don't have the skills right now. We're not ready to hire you, but if you come back with a pre-employment certificate under your belt, then we will hire you. We'll run you through the same process. It takes a little more time. It takes basically 1 extra year or thereabouts, and students are a full-time student for that year, so it's a lot more expensive than the other way. But if the employer is not going to hire you unless you have pre-employment, then you better go get pre-employment. So in terms of the plan A and the plan B, pure apprenticeship might be the plan A, but in the meantime, they have to apply for plan A or plan B, ahead of time, because Sask Poly's trades programs are all first qualified, first admitted. So you have to apply very early. If they're in grade 12, they can apply as early as September 1st. If you're in grade 10 or 11 and it requires a grade 10 or 11, for example, electrical, if you want to become an electrician, you can apply on the first day of grade 11, as long as you're going to take math 20, any of the 320 level maths, and you finish it, you can apply before you even, just on the first day you started. So that's a really important thing, because sometimes they fill up really quickly. Any of the machinery or the mechanics programs, industrial mechanics, agriculture, machinery tech, automotive, auto body, they all fill up really quickly. So students need to apply very early. All right. And if parents are have if the student is the first one out of the nest, then it's a little more stressful for parents. So if you're dealing with your oldest child, it's nice to be able to get information. Obviously, talking to me is a start, but it's really good to get information from each post-secondary institution. Their websites all have information about what parents can expect and things that parents need to know. When we're talking about admission requirements, the ones that are based on marks it's important for students to know that just because they meet the minimum doesn't mean they're going to get in. So a program like nursing, for instance, if there's about 350 seats in the U of R Sask Poly nursing program. So they start with whoever applied has a 99, and then the 98 and 97, 96, and they go on until they get to the 350th person. And those people are all in and everybody else is out. And usually for nursing, a cutoff is about 87%. So it's really important that students to know that just because they have the minimum 70 or 75 or 80 doesn't automatically mean they're going to get in if everybody else who applies has a higher mark than that. In terms of prerequisites, it's really important to make sure, I always tell students, take as much as you can handle. And if you have pre-calc 30 as your math, and you have one science or two, preferably three, but if you have at least a couple of grade 12 sciences, so let's say usually it's biology and chemistry, that puts you in a position to take just about anything in university or tech school. If you have all three sciences, chem, physics, and biology, you're pretty much, and pre-calc 30, you're pretty much able to go anywhere and do anything. If you want to have a quick look at what you can take in high school to get into certain programs in SAS Poly, if you go to the prerequisites list here, this is something that I update at the beginning of each year. So for instance, you need to have health science to get into these two programs at SAS Poly. You need biology to get into these programs at the U of S, U of R, and SAS Poly. And so this is a good starting point, but you always want to check the post-secondary institutions for the most up-to-date version of this, because sometimes they will change things in the middle of the year or wherever, and I don't get to the chance to update it all the time. So always take a look at that. And choosing where to go to school, there's opportunities for different programs in different places. Sometimes it's a very similar program or the exact same program in multiple places. And I'll kind of address that here as we go along. In terms of timelines to apply, lots of people want to know when. So the basic rule of thumb for university is around Christmas time is a good time to apply. Usually you can't apply right away in September like you can for first qualified, first admitted at SAS Poly, but you can apply sometimes, usually around the beginning of October, somewhere in there. And there are some, however, that require students to apply by December 1st of the year. And there's some programs at the U of S that do that. Some schools in Alberta and BC do that. So just keep an eye out for those if you're studying or you're looking at the institution websites for due dates and stuff. Take careful note of those, because you might miss the boat if you're applying too late. But generally speaking, you can get into most things in Saskatchewan, U of S, U of R, around Christmas time. And some of those programs are 100% based on admission. Like I mentioned, the nursing program. Some stuff at SAS Poly is based on marks, plus you have to do something else. So you have to do a career investigation, or you have to do some research and things like that. And those will be evident when you apply for them. It'll be explained in greater detail. And then the biggest one that students need to worry about in terms of time is first qualified, first admitted. So I think I mentioned it earlier. If it says grade 11 and math 20 like electrical, or if you want to get into ag machinery tech, it's actually a grade 10. So on the first day of grade 10, you can apply. That's the earliest time you can apply, basically September 1st of your grade 10 year. And you can be accepted, and your name will wait in the queue until you're done grade 10, 11, and 12. So the earlier, the better. I have spoken to students this year who applied for different trades programs. I know industrial mechanics, agriculture, machinery tech, a handful of those are filled generally by the middle of September to the end of September. Certainly by October, they're all full. And so you want to make sure, if you're thinking about applying to SAS Poly, you can always say no. You can you spend $75 to apply, but it's not a bad insurance policy against not having the opportunity to go. So it's definitely worth applying early. You can always pull the pin, like I said, and not bother to apply, but it's a good insurance policy against that. Not having a place to go in the fall, or not having a school to go to. In terms of transcripts, it's important to get the Ministry of Education to send your transcripts. So what I always tell students is, and some schools will take, some post-secondary institutions will take a transcript from a high school to get a principal or counselor or somebody to sign it. But many places are going towards the only transcript that they will accept is a transcript from the Ministry of Education directly. So that's what you do here. You pay $25, you go through the process. Eventually you get to a screen that looks like this. So you would check off, I want my transcript sent as soon as possible, pick whatever school you're talking about, and then add to cart. Another time after January, add to cart. Another time after June, add to cart, and then you're done. So you get 3 transcripts sent, you get up to 5 transcripts sent for $25. So if you send 3 with, let's say you're going to apply to U of S and U of R, you send 3 to the U of R, then you send 3 to the U of S, that's going to cost you $25 plus $2 for the any of them over 5. So you get 5 for 25. If you spend $2 more, it's going to cost you $27 if you do it all at the same time. But if you did one today and one tomorrow, one the next day, it's 25 each time. So to save yourself a couple dollars, make sure you do now, January and June. And even for students on a block system or whatever, if you're doing something a little bit different than a regular semester system, it doesn't matter. That's how you want to do it. So I would recommend you apply to school first, then worry about this. So in terms of living arrangements, I always tell students to research it ahead of time. I generally recommend residence. I think it's a good way to start. The cost of residence, I'll do a little pro and cons list here for you. If you go back to the planning tab here, there's a residence handout that you can check out. Kind of the pros and cons of residence. I think it's important, especially for students who have come from a smaller school, or if you're a little bit on the nervous side or anxious, having friends automatically, whether you like it or not, is going to happen in residence. It's one of the best ways to ease the transition from high school into post-secondary, if it's an option. There's no residences at SAS Polytech. Universities do have them, but you certainly want to look into that. And at the U of R, there are actually empty spaces in residence, or you have the availability of some seats or places in residence for students who are not going to the U of R. So they will rent out a room to students who are going to SAS Poly or some of the vocational schools in Regina. So if you end up in Regina, not at the U of R, but you want to stay in residence, you can actually live at the U of R. The other thing about residence that I tell students is one of the best ways to get rid of a friend, or to break up with your best friend, is to move in together. And that's okay if you want to do that. But if you're trying to keep the friend, usually it's best to set ground rules. And I always tell students, if you pretend like you're complete strangers, and if you're going to move in with a complete stranger, you'd probably set ground rules, and you'd say, okay, here's what we're going to do. Are we going to be slobs, or are we going to be neat freaks? And if we're going to be slobs and we're going to be happy with dishes piled up to the ceiling covered in fur, then everybody's going to be happy. But if you got a neat freak living with a slob, you're going to have some trouble. So to avoid throat punching somebody in the middle of the night because you're being a slob or being a neat freak, then you set down the ground rules ahead of time, and hopefully everybody's going to be happy. So always lay down some ground rules. Makes for a happy time. The other thing with residence is that students can do in-person visits where it's allowed. Some of it is allowed in some places because they're in small groups or single people, one person on a tour at a time. But if they're not allowing that, or just a matter of convenience, if you don't have to drive to a certain place, there's a lot of virtual tours where they can do the 360-degree view of the room and things like that. There's all kinds of options as well. There are options in most places for anything from a single room with a bed and a desk in it, where you have to get a meal plan, up to 1, 2, 3, 4-bedroom apartments that you share with other people. You do your own cooking or whatever you want. The costs are generally not that much difficult, or not that much more money than an apartment. They can be a little bit more than some apartments. You can always get a sketchy apartment in Stabsville, but it's best to probably check out your prices and things like that. And I always tell students, you spend a little bit more in your first year to ensure that you are still there after your first year and you don't graduate at Christmas. Then you are probably doing doing yourself a good favor. Distance learning. So this includes, I classify this as the online version of learning, because a lot of, obviously with COVID, that's made a big change to post-secondary learning options, where I think students are able to take probably into the future, when things go back to, you know, the option of having things 100% in person, there might be students who decide to take most of their post-secondary training at home. And so you can save a lot of money doing that. The other thing is that I classify as distance learning, or something outside, would be kind of like alternate campuses. That's what I call them. So an example of that would be a place like St. Peter's College, or the regional colleges. So you can take a lot of first-year university classes in a regional college. So in places like Weyburn or Estevan or Swift Current, they offer all kinds of first-year university classes for both the U of S, U of R. And you could also you can also do some of the trades programs in places like that. And then a place like St. Peter's College is actually a second campus of the U of S. So they offer pretty much everything that the U of S offers. Any first year programs at the U of S, you can take them at Sass Paul or at St. Pete's. And the main benefit is, instead of being in a first year math class with 350 or 400 students, you're going to be in a first year class with 12 or 15. So making that transition out of high school, especially in schools where you know everybody. I do career counseling in some really small towns where the first year math class is going to have more people in it than the whole town does where the student went to school. So when you have that kind of a culture shock and transition to make out of high school, going to some place like St. Peter's or some of the regional colleges instead for that first year makes life a lot easier. And as an example, St. Pete's, you don't have to apply to the U of S for your second year. You just automatically go. You just do it for that first year. And you're eligible for those scholarships at that institution. So you're eligible for all the U of S scholarships plus additional ones from St. Peter's. So there's some scholarship opportunities on top of that students can take in. Anytime the opportunity arises for an open house or a tour of some kind, I recommend students take it. They were doing virtual tours and virtual open houses this year and last, but hopefully they're going to be back into the in-person ones. But when you get to do that, you get to actually try things out. Spend-a days are also really good. I know Medicine Hat calls it big student for a day week. They have a whole week where students can go and you get partnered up with somebody taking the classes that you're taking or that you'd like to take, and you go sit in on class for a couple hours and see what things are like in university or tech program or whatever you're interested in doing. So when those open house days are happening, we'll be in the student career news, which I will show you in a couple minutes. Federated colleges are similar to those regional colleges, except they're on campus. So St. Thomas More is the one at the U of S, Luther, Campion, and First Nations University are at the U of R. And they have an affiliation with the university, so you still get a U of R or U of S degree. They used to have a religious connection, so you don't have to be Luther or Catholic or First Nations to attend. The main benefit is you get the U of R, U of S scholarships plus the ones from the Federated College. When it comes time to register for classes, this is more of a university thing. Sass Poly, it's a little more straightforward than this. University, you have a choice and a list of classes to pick, and you have certain ones you have to take, and then other ones are electives. And it's really important to sit down with an academic advisor. Usually that takes place in May or beginning of June of your grade 12 year, and you sit down and you talk to somebody. Sometimes it's in person or Zoom or phone or whatever, and then a little after that you decide, or you sit down and actually choose the classes that you want to take that's for upcoming semester. Anytime students have academic difficulties, I always tell them ask for help, especially when you're talking about university, when you're doing or tech school. If you're doing a 2, 3, 4 year program, they want you to stay. They don't want you to quit. They don't want you to go home at Christmas and never come back, because you're not going to pay them any more tuition that way. So if you spend some time talking to people, asking for help. Usually it's in programs like, or classes like math, stats, writing are usually kind of the three: math, stats, and writing. If you can get some help, it's best to do it early. If you're having, as soon as you're having trouble, just go ask for help. It's really important to do that. Some students have specific needs that require a little extra help. So that might be things like a reader or a scribe, or maybe a separate room or quiet room to write exams, or extra time on an exam or something like that. For those students, if you had a test from an educational psychologist in the last few years prior to grade 12, then any accommodations that are made in high school or middle school can carry on to post-secondary. So you don't have to worry about doing anything in particular. Just talk to the people at that institution early on, especially if it's any kind of a special need of any kind. Make sure you talk to people early, and it makes life a lot easier for you and for them. For students who are new to Canada, a couple things: you might have to prove your ability in English. So if you've taken English for grade 10, 11, and 12, then you don't have to do that in most places. Some places it's 2.5 years, or sometimes it's 2. But if you've done all 3 years, then you're probably okay. If you've only done a year and a half in English in Saskatchewan or in Canada, then you may have to take one of these English equivalency exams. And also, one thing that's not listed here yet is if you are applying for permanent residency or haven't done so, you want to do that really early, because you have to pay the international tuition, which is usually half again as much or double or worse than the domestic tuition. So you certainly want to make sure, if you're permanent or applying for permanent residency, that you do it early. Those students who wish to go to the United States, often that's for sports scholarships or for programs that aren't available in Canada. ACTs or SATs are often required. They're starting to become a lot less required in the last year and a half with COVID, but they still may be in certain schools. So you may want to look into that. You can write them multiple times, and there are writing centers. Assiniboia is one of them, and there's a couple in Moose Jaw and Regina. So you have to look on the website, just search it up on the internet, and schedule a time that works for you to write the ACTs or SATs. Or sometimes the school has their own specialized or different standardized test of their own. And these tests are kind of a general aptitude where you do a little bit of math, a little bit of writing, a little bit of reading, a little bit of history, and so on, different sciences and so on. Tuition. So books, tuition, living expenses for 1 year away from home is somewhere in the $15,000 to $30,000 range, depending on the course you're taking and other things connected to it. So that's why I talk about scholarships and a bunch of free money. So there are school level scholarships. Most schools have their own scholarships. The school division manages a number of scholarships. Each post-secondary institution has scholarships, and then there's provincial and national scholarships. It's really important for students to start applying early and getting ready to apply. So I always tell students to think of it a little bit like running a marathon. If you had to wake up today and run 26 miles, it might be difficult, but if you've been training for 6 months or a year, it's not so bad. If you have your ducks in a row when it comes time to apply for scholarships, it's not so bad. After you do the first 1 or 2 applications, they get a lot easier. And I always tell kids it's a little bit like going fishing. If you ever go fishing, you're never going to catch 100% of the fish in the lake. You're not going to clean it right out, but you keep throwing the hook in the water trying. And that's the same thing with scholarships. You keep throwing your applications out, and if you only get 5 or 10% of what you applied to get, that's 5 or 10% more than you would have gotten if you applied for none. So the only guarantee with scholarships is if you apply for nothing, you're going to get nothing. And I usually ask students if they have a part-time job, and some have one, and some get paid pretty well and some don't. And I use the analogy, I say, would you like a job that pays you $50 an hour? And most of them are quite happy with that. They would say they would certainly be interested. And I said, if you spend 10 hours applying for scholarships and you get $500, it's like you're working for $50 an hour. So think of it like that. Some students don't have a social insurance number, and it is a requirement for certain post-secondary programs. It's required for some university applications and certainly for student loans. So students have to do a number of things to get scholarships. One is to start writing down the things that they have done. Some students are really good at volunteering, and if they're involved in the SRC or SLC, if they volunteer in the community, if they have taken certain courses, if they've got CPR and first aid and stuff like that, that's a great thing. So start writing those things down. Next thing are any associations or connections that you have as students or parents have. So if you're members of the Hockey or Golf Association or 4-H or different organizations like that, service clubs sometimes offer that. Sometimes parents' work is an opportunity for scholarships for students. Sometimes there's scholarships for specific post-secondary programs. If you're going into a Red Seal trade, any trade where you're certified to work as a journey person anywhere across Canada, there's money for the program, those kind of programs. Some students have and health bursary programs and engineering. Agriculture is a huge one. There's a lot of scholarships for agriculture students. And then there's scholarships for athletic or musical skills that students have. Some students play hockey or football or baseball or whatever it might be at a post-secondary institution. And then the marks. And I found over the years that marks are important, but they're not necessarily the most important thing. Some student who has a 97 average and never leaves the house is often less likely to get scholarships than somebody who has a 85 to a 90, 92 or something like that and is out busy doing things and volunteering. A couple things about scholarships. It's really important to register with these organizations, Scholartree, Scholarships Canada. They're kind of like a news aggregator, but for scholarships. So you will register with them, and then they're going to send you an email every month or two and say, hey, there's some scholarships coming up about this and that and whatever program you said you're interested in. So they'll focus on sending you scholarships and reminders for very specific scholarships connected to what you said you're interested in doing. I will show you a little bit of information about student loans when I finish up the tour of the website here in a minute. So I'm going to go through some of these, not all of them, but I recommend students take a look at every single one of these. You might find good information that works for you. Some of these things are kind of a little bit like a math problem. There might be 3 or 4 ways to get to the end and solve the problem. And some of these might work for you and they might not work for the next person or vice versa. So take a look at them. There's some apps here that you can download to help you with career education. Keys to success. I always tell students it's really important to avoid some pitfalls. And these are 3 areas where students often have trouble, especially in the first year of post-secondary. So one of them is breaking down large tasks. So if they give you a 500-page textbook, how do you break that down into manageable pieces? Time management can be a bit of a thing for students. I always ask them if they procrastinate, and usually they say yes. So having the ability to figure that out and how to deal with it is important. And then how to read effectively and efficiently. So if you read something and your eyes kind of scan the words, but in your mind you're out riding a bike, or eating a potato, or doing something else, this SQ3R study strategy will help, or reading strategy will help you to become a more focused reader. You'll get a lot more out of it when you read. So the S is for survey. So if you have a chapter in a book, you look at the introduction, conclusion, get an idea of what it's about, look at all the pictures and headings and stuff. Q is for questions. So write down some questions that you think you're going to be answered after you do your little survey. Then the 3 R's are read it, recite means answer the questions, and then review. So you become a lot more of an active reader and you get a lot more out of it. And that's important for, especially for university or even for technical stuff. If you're looking at wiring diagrams, if you're talking about mechanics or things like that, it's really important to be as effective as you can be when you're reading. There's some information on budgeting and financial planning and things like that, career planning questions. These kind of go with the big handout. So there's kind of a written list of questions. Kids can print that off and fill in the blanks. I showed you the career safety education. This one's a little bit more for grade 10 and 11 students who are choosing subjects for high school. But basically the message is if you can take everything you can handle in grade 10, 11, and 12, you're going to be in a good position to be able to change your mind if you decide you want to go do something else after grade 12. There's a credit tracking handout that you can use to keep track of what credits you've taken and marks you had and all that kind of thing. This to-do list is a list of things that I recommend students do. This list is, the beginning of the list is more for grade 12 or grade 11 students. And then we get into a little bit more grade 12 type stuff here. But spend the time looking at stuff like this. It's kind of a checklist as a reminder of, hey, what do I need to do? There is a timeline here, and if students are graduating this year, then these are accurate. If they're graduating next year, then generally speaking, this is about the same time, or this is the time each year that this kind of thing happens. So for instance, the October open house days are usually in October, some in September. The big career fairs in Regina and Saskatoon are in November. Certain dates for scholarship applications in February at the U of S and March in the U of R and things like that. So take a look at those dates, make sure you don't miss any. There's a lot of things that are difficult for students to face when they transition from grade 12 into post-secondary. And so some of these are things you just have to learn how to deal with, and some of them are a little bit more difficult. So for instance, you're going to have to learn how to play the game of post-secondary. Sometimes it feels like you're a circus animal jumping through hoops, but once you get the hang of it, it's a little bit easier. You have to learn how to pay your own bills and be independent and all that stuff. And some of those things are just things you have to figure out how to do. Other things, being homesick, there's a kind of a solution to that. If you go into residence, you're not likely going to be homesick. If you are going to have difficulty shopping for groceries and cooking for yourself, then you can get a meal plan. And as I mentioned earlier, it might be a little bit more money up front, but it might save you a lot more money and a lot more headache in the long run. So these are some of the obstacles in moving to post-secondary. The list of prerequisites that I showed you earlier is here. It's kind of a rerun of that. Excuse me. Relevance Magazine is a publication of the Saskatoon Industry Education Council. So they have published this. They publish it every January, and this is just fairly hot off the presses. They have all kinds of different little stories about people doing entrepreneurial things in Saskatchewan, and journey people, and people doing all kinds of different occupations. How to be successful, lots of different little bits and pieces of advice. And if you go down to page 20, which is the one I always like to remind students about, there is a list of scholarships, and some of them are very specific, like you have to be going into an apprenticeship trade, and this is more like loans and stuff, and each post-secondary has scholarship opportunities and so on, but you're going to want to look into that. The other thing that kids always want to know is how much money can you make. So this category happens to be business, finance, and administration, but students can learn about different jobs. So this happens to be accounting clerk, so it tells you a little bit of what they do, ballpark salary, skills, knowledge, tools, technology, and other work requirements, and then kind of the training and things that they have to do to get into the places you can take the training to get into that program. So that's Relevance Magazine. And I showed you the residence handout and the apprenticeship one. If you're interested in nursing, there's a description of the 2 nursing programs for registered nurses in Saskatchewan. And then this is the what should I do after high school thing that I showed you at the beginning. To finish this off, that's the transcript request thing that I showed you. This is the actual place you go to actually request the transcripts. You go to request, check off yes. You actually keep going to the next and next and next and all that sort of thing. And then eventually it'll ask you for that, get to that point where you're going to want to choose now, January and June. And this is another version of that, or the rerun of that prerequisites list. If you're looking for specific contact information for people at the U of R or U of S or Sask Poly, there are Sometimes there's a name connected, sometimes there isn't. Great Plains College in Swift, some of our students go there. Olds College, Lakeland College, places like that. Medicine Hat, and so you can take a look at that if you need to track people down. And these are the web-based programs that I showed, the My Blueprint sign up and takes you right to the site, or then this is the link right to the site. Student career news. So we're under students and we're going to go to the career news. So this is a newsletter that I put together every month, and it's got information on a lot of post-secondary stuff from here, there, and everywhere. So the beginning part is general stuff that doesn't necessarily fit in any other spot. And the next part is post-secondary specific, so U of R, U of S, SAS Poly, and so on. And the next part, oh, these are the regional colleges. So I mentioned that earlier, that the regional colleges there's 7 of them in the province, and you can take a lot of SAS Poly programs, a lot of first-year university courses. Some even you can take your whole practical nursing course and things like that. The career colleges I mentioned are those vocational schools. So those are the private schools, usually for hair and aesthetics. And you can take a look at that if that's something that you're interested in doing as a student. This is just a list of dates, and there are things here to check out. I know that some students want to do a gap year, and if you're familiar, like some gap years are just basically, I'm going to go work for a while, and that's fine. Some gap years, I'm just going to go back here. I think it's number 7. Let's see. Oh, there we go. Number 12 and 13. So for students who are interested in taking a year away from grade 12, after grade 12, to do something, but they're not sure what, if they're maybe not ready for post-secondary or not ready for the job market, there's a couple options, and I don't have any personal experience with them. I don't know of students who have gone to these, so I can't speak to their utility, but there's 2 versions. One is Discovery Year, and it's a program where students pay basically similar to university tuition. It's about $7,000. They move to Ontario because everything is in Ottawa or Toronto, I forget, and they learn all kinds of things to help them in their year after they do the gap year. So whether it's resume writing and personal soft skills kind of stuff, like interview skills or whatever it might be, gaining confidence, dealing with anxiety, or whatever it might be. There's all kinds of different things that they do throughout that year. And there's an information session every once in a while. I think that happens to be today or tomorrow. Yeah, tomorrow. And then there's the Canadian Gap Year Association, which is a little bit more like an a la carte kind of thing. So you can buy things like, for $100, you can buy kind of like a little bit of a program you go through, and you go through some steps. And for, I think it's about $2,000 or $500, I forget the prices of everything. You can get kind of like a life coach for a couple of months, like someone who will help you with different things. So those are a couple things that I'm not familiar with the details on them, other than what I read on their websites. So for some students who aren't ready to go on to post-secondary, but they think they'd like to eventually do that, but they're not ready, something like a specific purposeful gap year might be handy. All right, I'm going to go down to the scholarships now. So every month I put some scholarships in here. There's information like those different organizations I mentioned earlier, and you register with them, and then they're going to send you email reminders as to to apply for certain scholarships. And there's financial planning and things like that here. And then I get into a list of scholarships, and this is just to kind of get kids started and get you thinking about things. So for instance, some of them are very specific, and you have to be doing a very specific program. So let's say this one, you have to be going into engineering. and you have to be a female. And then this one, this one's open to anybody, but you have to live in an RM. Your parents have to pay tax to an RM, and you have to write a little essay, but you can be going into any program. So I always tell students, look for the scholarships that are specific to that particular program that you're entering, and then look for scholarships that are open to anybody doing anything. You just have to do something specific. So this one, you can be, as long as you meet the requirements of living in a rural municipality, you're okay. And this one, let's see here. This one, you just have to fill out a form and write an essay on how financial literacy has made a difference in your life. So you don't have to be doing a specific program. This one, you have to write a rhyming cowboy poem. You don't have to go into anything in particular. You just have to write a rhyming cowboy poem. So those are things that students need to look at. And if writing is not in your wheelhouse, but collecting is, then you can collect 100,000 devices and get $100,000, tablets, smartphones, stuff like that. Or if you get 1 million of them, you get $1 million. So that is something that you can do if that's of interest to you. So that is the career news in January. And then we're going to go to the career spotlight. So the career spotlight has a combination of an interview and a presentation. We partnered with these folks last year, and we have a person helping them put some of these interviews together. So for parents, you can go to the playlist and check out the playlist of all the videos that have been put up here on apprenticeship or SAS Poly or the U of S or U of R or band funding for First Nations or Gabriel Dumont or whatever. There's all kinds of different options for videos and learning more information. And then if you want to get into very specific program or specific things, I've always told students the best way to learn about a job is to do it. So if you get the chance to actually try it out, that's great. Many times you can't do that. It's not available in your community or just doesn't exist until you've gotten training. You can't be a hairstylist or a dentist. You can't just walk around looking in people's mouths. You have to actually have training to do it. So you can, if you can't try it out yourself, the next best thing is to talk to somebody who's doing it. So if you know somebody, you have a friend of a friend who can help you with that, that's the next best thing. And if you can't do that, check out the videos. These are all people who are actually doing that work. So marketing manager, this happens to be agriculture, and people who work for Richardson Pioneer, and people who are commodity traders or John Deere production system specialist or a beekeeper or whatever. So they've put together all kinds of different things here on trades and business and financial planning and health. There's all kinds of health careers and science careers. So you can take a look at these. They're anywhere from about 15 or 20 minutes up to an hour, hour and a half of information that will help students hopefully make a decision or maybe rule something out. You might not make a decision for yes, for sure, I want to do that, but you might realize, you know what, I don't think I like that. And you move on from that. So that's the career spotlight. I showed you the apprenticeship credit stuff has the youth apprenticeship on it. And then I'm going to move on to scholarships. So for students who have never applied, I always say this is a good starting point. If you've never applied for a scholarship, check out the 5 tips, the general scholarship tips, and that will help you get going. Shows you how to dot the I's and cross the T's and stuff like that. The next section is scholarship, bursaries, and loans, and the post-secondary finance page has more financial planning and budgeting and things like that. There's an every dollar budgeting app that's kind of handy, fairly popular. Student loan information. For this one, there's this loan estimator that students can fill out. So they put the program, the name of the program that they're doing, or the type of program, and all the information about it. You need family income. So basically, what's the bottom line on your income tax last year? And then they'll give you a ballpark idea of about how much money you would get if you're eligible for a loan. So this particular Canada Saskatchewan student loan is based on parental income. So if you make more than a certain amount of money, whatever their cutoff is each year, you're not eligible for the loan. But students, there's loans and then there's grants, and students who are not eligible for the loan can still apply for the grant, and you might get a couple $1,000s out of it, and you don't have to pay it back. So that's the one kind of student loan, is the Canada Saskatchewan integrated student loan. The other student loans, if you're not eligible but you need some money, would be a bank student loan. Then those ones are less preferable because you have to pay back the full amount, but they're more likely to be available to you because they are based on, if you default on the loan, they can take your car or your house or whatever. So this is purely based on financial income of the parents, and the other ones are obviously based on that. The bank loans are based on that, but you're more likely to get one if you don't meet the criteria for the Canada Saskatchewan student loans. I'm going to go one more here. There's other stuff here like apprenticeship information. So if students are interested in apprenticing, there's actually grants that students can acquire for apprentices up to $2,000 or up to $4,000, $1,000 each year. If you're female, there's even additional money for females going into trades, and you can get apprenticeship loans. You get unemployment or employment insurance when you're off on your 7 or 8 week training period. So lots of different opportunities for some financial assistance there. General scholarships are at the top here. These are scholarship sites that will send you on to other scholarship sites. And then these are a little more specific, like this one's, connected to agriculture and health bursaries and SaskPower and SaskTel and things like that. Student Career News is up there twice because it's kind of important. And then these are the links to the specific scholarship sites for each post-secondary institution in Saskatchewan and Alberta. We have a fair number of our students go to Alberta, and the regional college link is here too, so you can check that out. The actual student loan application starts here. So student loans, you can't apply for the Canada Saskatchewan student loans until the first or second week of June each year. But before that, you can do that estimator. And before that, you can also learn about how to apply. So you can check out the videos, download the handbook. There's a handbook up here somewhere. Where did it go? Oh, there we go. So you can download the handbook, check that out, learn about all this before you start the application process. And then the scholarship resources that are here, this is probably the handiest thing. It's a little organizer, a little spreadsheet here. When it wakes up, come on now, there we go. Did that show up, Jeff? Yeah, okay. So students can use this as little or as much as they want. They put as little or as much information as they want, but you can put the name and all that sort of thing. The most important one in my mind is to put the deadline in properly, and then you can hit the sort arrow there and then it'll sort based on putting the ones that are due first up at the top, and hopefully you won't miss out on any scholarships if you're searching. And I always tell students in grade 11, start this process in grade 11, so when it comes time to to look at it in grade 12, you're ready to roll. If you're in grade 12, you haven't missed out on every scholarship in the world. You might have missed out on some, but you still have time. So always look as soon as you can. And there's a couple examples of cover letters and things that students can benefit from here. The last tab I'm going to show you is the scholarship application for the Prairie South scholarships. Any scholarship that's here, the sponsor of the scholarship give a check to the school division and said, you guys handle the paperwork and the applications. So if your school is not on here, it's because the scholarship is handled by the sponsor of the scholarship. So maybe the co-op or the credit union or different service clubs in town, Kinsman or Lions Club or somebody, they handle their own scholarships. They're not on this list. And typically schools will have a list, principals or somebody in the school will have a list of all the scholarships for students in that particular school. These scholarships are ones that anybody who's graduating this year can apply to get if you meet the criteria. The only one that's open to anybody is this Journey to Hope one, and you have to write a little 100-word blurb on how you spread hope. I'm not sure exactly what that all entails, but if you spread hope, or if you think you spread hope, you can apply for that one. The rest of them, you must do something very specific. So I'll zip through the list just to show you really quickly. This one, you must be going into aeronautical engineering. This one, you must be going into education. You must have graduated from Lyndale. You must have some kind of a special need. This one I'm going to come back to. This one, you have to play lacrosse in Moose Jaw. You must be going into English major or minor or something like that, like journalism. This one, you must dance in the Moose Jaw Festival of Dance. And this one, you must be going into agriculture. So for a lot of students, you're not going to catch more than maybe one or two of those. This one has a couple things that I like to show students. First of all, there's 10 awards, not just one, so it's kind of a nice scholarship. And it's for anybody going into any program, with preference given to those going into an ag-related program. So that means if there's 10 really good agriculture candidates and you're going into something different, you're not going to get that award, or not likely. However, it has been given away every once in a while because maybe only 7 or 8 or 9 candidates who are going into agriculture actually apply. So that means there's a space available for somebody else. And that's why when they wrote the terms of trust for the scholarship, they put preference, not must, because if they put must and they only had 7 agriculture candidates, they can't give it to somebody else. This gives the leeway to allow students who are not going into agriculture to receive it. Often students are going to see things like academic diligence and community involvement as requirements. So you have to work hard in school, work hard in the community. And that is evident by things that students put in the letter, like your career objectives and then what you've done. And then there's, when you fill out the actual application, there'll be a green button when it's open, because these don't open until about the beginning of the second semester here, 1st of February. And then they're going to close on, I believe, the 29th or 28th of April, right at the end of April. So I always tell students, make sure that when you're trying to address this, by especially when you're getting a reference to do it. So letter of recommendation. Letters of recommendation are usually going to be 2 people to write that. One would be a teacher, the other would be an employer. And you need to tell people the things about you that they don't know. So teachers can speak to students' academic diligence. If you're a teacher and or student in a classroom, people know how much you work hard in school and all that sort of thing. But maybe they don't know that you go to the nursing home and read to old people, or you help coach a little kid's ball team or soccer team or something like that. You need to tell people the things about you that they don't necessarily know. And if you do that, you're in a good spot. So that kind of brings things to a close.